Before we kick off this episode of Headstrong, I want to talk to you about my series sponsor, Green Chef. Now, if you're anything like me, you are always on the go and rarely have time to even think about eating healthy, let alone going to the shop, picking out the right ingredients, and then getting home and devoting loads of time to cooking these meals. Luckily, Green Chef are one step ahead. They deliver your ingredients and step-by-step recipe cards directly to your door, making it the easiest and most convenient way to keep healthy eating habits on track. Green Chef offers a wide variety of delicious recipes each week, with options including keto, vegan, flexitarian, lower carb, and vegetarian diets. Even better, all of these recipes contain one or more of your 5 a day. What an absolute bonus. Green Chef recipes are developed and approved by qualified nutritionists, so you can relax knowing that your meals align with your dietary needs and lifestyle. So, get 40% off your first box and 20% off your next 3 boxes with the code HEADSTRONG. That's Headstrong for 40% off your first box and 20% off your next 3 boxes with Green Chef. Hello and welcome to another episode of Headstrong. You're listening with me, Louis Strong, and this is Season 7. Headstrong is a podcast where I sit down with a variety of individuals in the public eye to talk to them about their lives and their careers, but notably, I want to talk to them about their vulnerabilities so I can understand what the word headstrong means to them. On today's episode is actor Lo Truglio. Now, Joe is most famous for his role of Charles Boyle in the hit TV series Brooklyn Nine-Nine, available on Netflix right now. But he's also just tried his hand as a first-time director with a film coming out soon this year, which we go into depth about. We also talk about his imposter syndrome as an actor and often feeling that he isn't good enough to be in the place that he is. So I really hope you enjoy this episode of Headstrong. Joe, thank you so much for joining me on Headstrong. How are you on a Tuesday morning in Los Angeles?
I'm wonderful. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for asking.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So we were just chatting before we commenced this episode. I'm really excited to get you on, not only as a fan of your amazing work and being a part of one of my favorite shows, but to hear your wisdom of years under the belt as an actor and an industry leader and now director and producer, no less. So
yeah, it's
exciting.
I'm very excited about it. It's a big chapter change here for me after Brooklyn Nine-Nine being done and leaping into being a first-time filmmaker. It's all very exciting and scary, which is great. Kind of like that kind of area to be in,
and to
uncertainty.
First understand this, I suppose it stems from your fascination as a child, and I want to understand where this all sparked from when you were younger. So where did this love of performance and performing come from as a child?
I think part of it is being Irish and Italian, lots of cousins and lots of gatherings and lots of humor and wanting attention in these large groups. And humor was always a big part of growing up. My family just loved telling stories and jokes. And I think it began there. And I always loved movies, and I think a lot of the performance was, hey, I want to do that. That looks like fun. So I just always came naturally to me. I always had a lot of energy. I've been restless for as long as I remember, and I think I've channeled that into performance and creating and trying to be an artist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Before comedy, Am I right in saying that you had a fascination, particularly when you were younger, in horror?
I did. Yeah, I was just actually. I'm really excited because it appears I might be able to get this movie that I did some press in Fangoria, which was a magazine that I adored growing up, and I was just trying to write an article for it explaining that question: where did this come from? And I remember I read a lot of Stephen King. I Cronenberg's The Brood made a big impact on me as a child, and I was always fascinated with macabre and blood and gore and special effects. And I think it began there. I've always loved to be scared. I never found it particularly off-putting or uncomfortable, and so I just really enjoyed the genre for that reason as well. Yeah.
It's almost like it's done a full circle with this fascination early childhood, and now you've created The Outpost, which is going to be amazing. Yeah. I have no doubt. So talk to me. Tell me some of the gems about Outpost. How can you sell it to me in an elevator?
Well, oh boy, well, yeah, well, it's about a woman who suffers a violent assault and tries to recover by taking a job as a fire lookout, and it doesn't go very well. The isolation and the PTSD start to get to her. But, with Outpost, I knew that I wanted to work with my wife. I knew that I wanted to work with friends, and I knew I wanted to make it different than other movies. And so part of that was, where can we shoot this movie that would be quite different? And allow people to be like, how did they do that? So we decided to pick the top of a mountain, which isn't the easiest place to shoot a movie. I've always been fascinated with stories about madness, because I feel like that's relatable. Who hasn't felt like they were going to lose it every now and then, especially nowadays? I feel it's particularly slippery. And I thought, let's dive into that. Let's dive into that idea, that being hijacked by a nightmare that you're not able to get out of. And so that was one aspect, really kind of exploring what happens to a person when their reality starts to slip away from them. Are they even aware of it? And then the other part of me really loved the idea of kind of sympathizing with the monster for 2 acts, and then suddenly realizing the monster is there. So you're going to see some terrific performances. I was able to work with a lot of terrific friends that I've known for a long time, and I don't know. I haven't really got my log line down yet, I suppose. But I'll say that that Outpost is a fever dream made by a horror fan, is another way to put this movie.
And it's incredibly exciting because, as I briefly said, it is your directorial debut into the industry.
Yeah.
How did you find that process, taking that extra job on then? Because it sounds like it was a fascination of yours and something that you wanted to do forever. And finally, you had the opportunity and the platform, and indeed the support of friends. But I do know that I think you self-financed it. But let's talk about this directing.
Well, I started making Super 8s at a very young age, and I think it began there. I enjoy collaboration. I found that so much of the successful projects that I've been part of have been collaboration, and that begins with the state and certainly with Apatow. Certainly the energy on Paul was similar. And of course, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and directing, I feel, is a wonderful way to kind of allow everyone's voices to kind of contribute to the idea that maybe you started. To let people rise up, to give people an opportunity to kind of express their version of what this story is to them, and that's very exciting for me. I find that I can be a pretty decisive person. I don't know everything, and I like people that come with something, that bring something to the table, and directing is a place where you can do that. It's just a place that you can really bring the best out of everyone, and I love doing that. On Outpost, we had a few people where this was their first movie on the crew. We had a stunt coordinator. The subject matter is pretty delicate, and I wanted to make sure that many women were involved in a lot of the larger creative departments. Our stunt coordinator had never stunt coordinated until this movie. Our production designer had done a couple of movies before that, but this was her first big movie. And so, I think that's important for a filmmaker to do, is to allow people to be their best, and feel like that they're part of this thing. This thing wouldn't really be complete or as special without their work.
Yeah, absolutely right. Whenever I've been involved in productions like that, it's always nice to thrive off other people's work and performances. And particularly when I was working with Nick Frost, and no take was the same, and it keeps me on my toes. And I was just like, "Well, this is great to watch and be a part of."
He's brilliant, both of them. I mean, for me, we could circle back to Outpost. I suppose we can jump everywhere, but just working on Paul, it was one of the biggest jobs of my life. I remember when I got to Santa Fe and got my own little bungalow. That there's a little welcome basket there, and I literally went to tears. I was so happy. It was finally something that I wanted to be part of. These guys and Shaun of the Dead obviously was a big influence to me. And I just felt very lucky to have been asked to be part of this thing. And I'll never forget it. Yeah. And Nick made Bill Hader and I one of the most incredible Sunday lunches that I've ever had. And it's very clear how much he loves cooking, but it's a meal that I will never forget. It was delicious.
Yeah, I always see Nick posting food, and he seems like a remarkable chef.
He is. You can
vouch for it.
I can vouch for that for sure.
Well, yeah. I feel like because we've brought it up, we might as well talk about Paul as an experience, because that double act with Bill Hader is, in my opinion, just so effortless, but so original, but so classic at the same time. In all three senses of that. Do you ever bring improvisation into your work, particularly with something like that? Because Bill's so amazing and hilarious.
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, in Paul, there was a bit of that, but Simon and Nick, it was a very tight script, and they were always rewriting. But I think they and Greg Mottola, they knew that they trusted us, everyone, the whole cast there, and we were able to bring, ideas and improvisation for sure. That was the first time I really got to know Bill. We had met a couple times before. I'd worked with Greg Mottola, of course, in Superbad. So and there was plenty of improvisation there. I love it. In Brooklyn, we didn't do a lot of that. The first season we did, and then it was like, okay, none of this ever stays in. We only got 22 minutes. Let's not waste everyone's time. And let's just, and the jokes, it's a mile a minute, that show. It's very dense with the jokes. So there wasn't a lot of room for that. But in Paul, it was a little different, and certainly in Superbad. I have fond memories of Paul, in addition to O'Reilly. Seth Rogen wasn't on set.
Yeah, of course.
And so I was filling in on my knees and have these knee pads. I have a wonderful little memento that production gave me that just has the knee pads framed,
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, it is brilliant. It's up on my wall right now.
That's amazing.
So you could kind of see it in the back there. Well, our listeners can't, but there's a little white in the back there. Anyway, with Paul, it was an experience that once again showed massive amounts of talents, really, really bringing out the best in each other.
100%. Can you remember that the phone call where you were offered the role?
No, I can't. I remember I was out with Bill Hader, and I know that he had mentioned that he had brought me up to Mottola. I don't know, and again, I really don't know how it all came to be. I knew that I was being considered. I don't remember it. I just remember getting there, and I remember arriving on one of the sound stages and meeting Nick and Simon for the first time. I think we were shooting some. Might have been just a rehearsal, perhaps. It was a great moment in my career.
100%. So now what I want to do is go back to childhood. I want to talk about school as an experience for you, because I don't know much about the education system in the States. But I want to know what the opportunities are like at school to express yourself on stage and screen.
I see. So, well, I was born in Queens, New York, and was in the school system there just for a little bit. I moved down to Florida when I was 5 years old. And the public school system there was fine. I was in a program for gifted kids that actually explored a lot of art and wrote a little bit. And we did small sketches and wrote little plays. Took a lot of field trips, and I think I always I drew a lot. I was a big illustrator, and so I think my love for art kind of began with that. I was drawing a lot of pictures of sharks and bloody limbs. That was kind of in my head, I guess, from Jaws, and so the school system down there. High school. I was in the high school drama department, but through the school I found wasn't where I kind of cultivated a lot of that. Most of it was in the neighborhood with friends, like-minded friends who loved comic books and Mad magazines and horror movies. And we would grab Super 8 cameras or gigantic, bulky VHS camcorders and try to do something with it. It was always very exciting. It just felt very real, like making these movies. It was tangible, and I'd sneak into a movie theater to go see, Friday the 13th, the final chapter, and then, come out and then try to recreate a scene, So I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but I'm trying to give you an idea of where this all kind of started for me in terms of my love for creating. The school I was in, like I said, the drama departments, and I started a film and TV club, I guess, at high school, which was a lot of fun. But I think the real practice was writing. I think it began with writing. I wrote a lot of short stories that were basically Stephen King ripoffs, because that's all I was reading. So I was kind of regurgitating. I think I wrote a story about a giant rock on a cliff that was haunted, that kept somehow getting in people's head and making them jump. And so again, this gets back to madness, and to get back to Outpost. I was always been fascinated with ideas like that. And so writing was, I think, the beginning of, for me, of filmmaking in a way, just getting those ideas down and then watching a lot of movies, sneaking when we didn't have cable, trying to go over to people's houses that had cable. And so I could see Piranha or there's a movie called The Evictors and Craven's Deadly Blessing, like all these movies that were constantly being played on cable. I was just studying. Yeah.
Well, I suppose as well, the luxury of today is there's so much content that's being made for young adults to watch. It's so easy to watch, readily available, even on YouTube for free, let alone the streaming platforms that are available. And for you, actually, I need to get out and just to have something in my hand and make it. And I'm so grateful for that. It just kind of taught me to kind of buckle in and just do it. That's the best education, is to get out there and do it. Better than a film education. I had a great time at NYU. I met a lot of the people I ended up working with, but ultimately, the best film classes on set and just with friends and pointing cameras and figuring it out. I want to talk about NYU with you. Was it an audition process or was it an application process?
It was an application. I wrote an essay. I think I submitted maybe a short movie or something I did for that film club that I created. I think it might have even been kind of a David Letterman-esque type of TV show that I might have submitted. And so when I got accepted, I was thrilled. It was either there or UCLA. I wanted to go back to New York. It's where I was from, and ended up meeting a lot of important people that remain friends to this day. Yeah, you know.
Well, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
you've forged some incredible friendships, but also colleagues that you've worked with for years and years and years now.
I think.
Yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's important. It's crucial to find your people. I feel that it is necessary in order to take risks, to make leaps, to know that people will catch you. I find that, especially in doing Outpost and the first cut of this movie, you're really sticking your neck out, and you're very vulnerable. You feel very raw, and so when you take it to your creative, to people that you trust, you want to trust their agenda. You want to know that they have the movie and your best interest in mind, because it's painful to hear. It's not good. I went into a pretty hard, deep depression after that first cut, and got a lot of notes. And I was like, I just made the biggest mistake of my life. What did I do? And of course, this is I learned part of the process of filmmaking, where you're like, oh my God, I think maybe it was Coppola who said something like, you'll never love anything more than your dailies and never hate anything more than your first cut, or I'm paraphrasing, but something like that. And it's true. And so I think finding your people is very important. You need to have them to have the confidence to do something that scares you.
You're absolutely right. And I think the word that you said was trust. You really need to trust the people that you're working with. And if you're friends with them, but trust them and then work with them, that's a real key.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So what I wanted to ask you then, you were just, so you felt depressed after seeing your first cut. Now, I know you probably bounced back and you're happy with your product, but talk to me about
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it was just a deep dive. I think part of it was, the movie that you write and the movie that you shoot and the movie that you cut are three different movies. And so the movie that I ended up cutting, I thought was communicating or showing something that clearly it was not. And I think that that was a good lesson to learn, because what I found was to kind of look at what we had here, what footage was in front of us, and the story that I have. Yes, that's still there, but now it's going to have to be told in a different way. So when I say like depressed, I'm exaggerating a little bit. I mean, I certainly was downtrodden. What I mean to say is that like the bubble was burst in a way. Like and that's always scary, right? When you think that you're in one place and you're like, oh, I'm not in New York at all. I somehow am in Camden, New Jersey. What happened? I thought, you know what I mean? Like you just wake up and you're like, oh wow, I really need to rethink this. So that was the shock to the system that was happening for me in that first cut.
And for you as well, you were out of your comfort zone, because your directorial debut, it's not often that you would get to see a first cut.
Right. Yeah. And I was wearing a lot of hats. I was wearing a producer and a financier, and I didn't want this to be shoved through with no other feedback or criticisms. I mean, it's a passion project for sure, but I wanted it to be grounded in something other than just what I thought it should be. And so, that was a challenging thing to look in the mirror and be like, oh, okay, all right, let's take another gander at this.
You talk about the weight on your shoulders there. You were, as you say, producing, directing, financier. Was it overwhelming for you, that experience of having a pressure on your shoulders?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had many moments where I had to get out a good get out a good cry, kind of shake and collapse, and be like, "Whoa, I'm really feeling it." It, it was it was Sisyphus. It was, what's the word? It was like Sisyphus, literally doing this, pushing this rock up this mountain. We're shooting during a pandemic. This was 3 years in the making. There were like and we only had a small window to shoot this movie, right? Because there was fire season. We shot at Fire Tower, so kind of in June, it was really the only window, because where we were shooting, the snow would come down starting in October, and it wouldn't melt until maybe the end of May. And so we only had a month or 2 months tops window. So every summer, if something went wrong, a pandemic or a casting issue or a location problem, we were waiting another year. And like the weight of that, of just the reality of making a movie like this really started to smother me a bit. Because, after a while, you get tired of hearing yourself talk about it. You get tired of hearing yourself, I'm going to make a movie. I'm going to make this movie. And you're like, will I ever make this movie? Was it not meant to be, And, that was hard. There was a hard reality to acknowledge. And so, yeah, my wife, Beth, is an incredible actor, and I knew that I wanted to work with her. This movie was going to be in our life for for at least 3 years. I wanted her to be a part of that. And, but that's also a risk, right? I mean, this is a marriage, that making independent filmmaking is not a easy task, and one filled with much pressure, much weight, and much temper. And that was a risk. It's not just my money. That's a risk. And so I'm known for comedy. That's a risk. But, I needed to be able to look at myself at the end when I'm slipping away and say, I did it. I at least did it. I didn't want to have that regret. So, if I leap and fall on my face, that's okay, because I'll be like, well, I swang for it, and I think it's great. I love where this movie is now. I cannot wait for people to see this movie, because it's different. I think it's going to, I hope, take people for a ride. I hope people are going to be like, whoa, I didn't see this coming. How did they make it? So yeah, I hope I wasn't putting too much of a dark cloud over that part of the process. But it was part of it. And, it's great to kind of come out on the other end of that and say, like, wow, I asked for this entire experience. I got it.
Yeah, full circle. You got the whole package.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when can I imagine you'll be doing festivals and things? But when can we?
Yeah, right now we're close to a picture lock now, and the music is coming in and some visual effects. So we'll be, I think, done probably in March sometime at the latest, and we'll start going the festival route. Yeah, and then certainly on social media, which I've been a bit slack on lately. I'll be jumping on there as well, promoting it.
Amazing. That's very exciting. Well, let's put directing to bed, because I want to talk about acting.
Yeah. All right.
Because life as an actor is a peculiar one, and one that many listeners might not be able to associate with. But actors spend a lot of time, or particularly maybe early in their career, unemployed.
Yes.
How have you coped with unemployment mentally as an actor? Because obviously hasn't happened for a while. But when you were younger, growing up, in your early adult,
starting out,
what's that like? Yeah, starting out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there was a lot of drinking, and so I realized that would not lead to very good places. And so I wrote a lot, and I've always tried to create work for myself. And in the beginning, I made sure that I always was trying to create something and not wait by the phone. it was very difficult. Like in this business, it's hard not to compare yourself to others' success and others' rate of success. It took a while for me to realize that, there was my own timeline. Everyone has their own path that they're going to have to take, and need to be patient for it. And again, trust that it's there. I think writing saved me. My friends, kind of talking about other ways to get this creative energy out, and watched a lot of movies. It was difficult. I took some acting classes for a bit. Felt like I was, staying in tune. But in the beginning, when it was tough, I tried to remind myself of what I had so far. Like I was lucky with the state, that was right out of college. So it was like a big bucket of cold water that was thrown on my face when the state ended, and didn't realize you don't just get television shows right out of college.
This sounds very similar.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, And so I had to trust the process, love the audition, love that I had, this moment to kind of play, and just keep believing in myself. Really, acting's hard. Acting, you really got to want to do it. You really, right. Several times I'm like, well, I'm done. There's something else I can do. And I couldn't think of anything that would really make me happy. And I was like, well, I don't know what else to do. I think I was I was thinking about a marine biologist maybe, or I like the outside, maybe be a forest ranger, but these are crazy notions. These are things I would never jump into. And not that there's anything wrong with either of those occupations, but it wasn't, I knew I wouldn't be ultimately happy there. So
yeah, for sure.
Just get plugging.
It's really interesting. Obviously, I know the state was much bigger than what I experienced, but I feel in a similar way to you, because I was at university still when I got Slaughterhouse Rules. And I was just like, I'm going to be acting alongside Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Michael Sheen. I'm like, this is mad. And then that finished, did that credit, and I got another credit pretty quickly after. And then I left uni, and as you say, it's cold water to the face. And it's like you're in the big bad world, and all of a sudden I didn't know what to do because I wasn't landing anything. But then I had to remind myself, look what I have done. I am not a failure. You're not a failure because you've already done some amazing things.
Yeah, that's great that you reminded yourself of that. It's important. It's easy to feel like you're going to get lost. Everyone has a fear of being useless and invisible, and it's very easy at a young age to kind of get wrapped up in that nonsense. But it's not nonsense at that age. It feels very real, and so that's great that you were able to see that, because after the state ended, I had to kind of remind myself, like, look, you were able to write and produce and direct at 21 years old. Like that's something. And the lean years also really do build you up. And it was a lesson I needed to learn, to be quite honest. It's just not, the ego needed to be in check. The ego always needs to be in check. And still to this day, I struggle with that too. But, as long, again, this gets back to friends too. If you have those friends that say, hey man, take a look at this, or, hey, stop that, or, hey, yeah, way to go. Like, that's just so important.
Well, I think then let's talk about Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then let's talk about ego in general as well, and what fame does to somebody, or indeed talk about your experiences with it and mentality. But it'd be rude not to talk about Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Let's talk about this audition process, first of all, for it. Can you remember that?
Yeah, I can. This is also a lesson about ego, and I brushed on this in another podcast. But I'll say that at the time I felt that I had, quote, proven myself as a comic actor, and I've I've done this, this, and this,
Mm.
and you know my work, and so there was a lot of stubbornness and ego on my end. After the first audition, I just wanted to kind of put myself on tape, and that was enough. And I'm embarrassed to admit that, and but that was what happened. And so, luckily, I had to kind of push past that entitlement and say, like, hey, let's get in on this and show up. So much of it is just showing up, and so I did, and thank God it changed my life. And I met people that to this day are still dear friends of mine. And I was part of a show that it's the largest thing I've ever been part of, and has reached so many people over the world in many different ways. I feel very blessed to have been part of that show. The audition process was pretty standard. I went on tape, and then you go in and have kind of a chemistry read with Andy. And Andy, I had met before. I'd known Andy while I was in I Love You Man with Andy, and we had mutual friends, of course. And so that was a very fun audition. There were several other great actors, comic actors, also auditioning there, and it was all very supportive. I remember kind of in the waiting room, which is the worst. Everyone's kind of waiting to go in and do the thing. You know it, you get it. And luckily we all knew each other, and we kind of knew the game, and we knew how it worked. And it was like, go get them. And I remember auditioning with Stephanie Beatrice, was the only other actor that I auditioned with, because in those early shows, of course, Charles Boyle and Rosa had a through line there, and so they wanted that chemistry. And then, the rest was kind of history. We started off really strong and just didn't look back.
I love that. The rest is history. I mean, it really is 8 series down. And what I want to talk about then is that first series, then, like fleshing out those characters, because that was it wasn't tried and tested like it is now. And as you say, reached millions of people across the globe. What was that first series like? Did it feel to you like you were on something special?
That's a tough question, because I did feel a connection with everyone pretty quickly, even from the first table read. So I knew that was rare. That doesn't always happen, to feel kind of comfort and safe pretty early on. And positive. Everyone was very positive, just naturally as people. And so I knew that was special, but I didn't know if that would translate to popularity or, a big audience, of course. So, so that first season, like any show, you're figuring out the kinks and the rhythms. With Charles and Rosa, I'm glad the writers kind of worked out what began as kind of a rather stalky, uncomfortable relationship between the two of them. And I'm glad that relationship ended up being a strong friendship between those two characters. And so likewise with the other relationships on the show, the writers found what was working and what wasn't. But the show always had, I felt like the first season, many of the episodes were a bit, the pacing was a little bit, took its time a little bit more. As the show went on, I felt that it began to move at a quicker pace. There seemed to be more jokes. And so that was one difference that I noticed between the early seasons and the later ones.
Yeah, I can understand that. Now, Boyle, when the Boyle you play, you exhibit such generosity in such a character, and a character that's taken for granted in the show. What makes him so likable? What is it to you? What can you relate to him from yourself?
From myself, well, I'm an optimist. There's a few things. I think, I like to have a positive outlook towards most things. I certainly think Boyle has that. Boyle is a lot more resilient than I am, and maybe a little bit more naive, I suppose. But I also find that wonderful about him. He just has this unadulterated affection to people and doesn't see that as a weakness. And I think that's a big reason why people, I feel, relate to Boyle, like that wish to, he gets knocked down and comes right back up, and he doesn't hold grudges for too long. And he doesn't really have a filter. And although he puts his foot in his mouth often, it never comes from a malicious place. It's always just very much from his heart. And I think that's that's an appealing trait to have,
How did you find getting into such a character? Because as we said, 22 minutes is not a lot of time, and often it is so fast going, but they have to exhibit precise characteristics of many of these characters.
Yeah, he has a lot of energy, Boyle, and so do I. And I think a lot of the eagerness that Boyle has, I think I was able to kind of attach my restless nature to, and I think that was the first kind of hook in this kind of puppy dog, energetic, supportive character. This personality that just was bouncing and wide-eyed and he was a grinder. He's a good detective. He enjoys the work. He's not afraid to work, and so I relate to very much to Boyle, that work ethic and just wanting to just get at it, just get down to it. Let's dig in and get after it. And so I think it began there. I think the energy and the eagerness of Boyle was my first kind of link into his character.
Often when filming, there's often many, many jokes shared when the camera is not rolling. So I need to ask you, do you have any standout memories from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, kind of when you're not rolling? Because I know that I read somewhere that you did find cockroaches in your underwear. Now, I know that won't be a highlight.
It's not a highlight. That we had an episode where, there was some bugs in the precinct, and they ended up in Boyle's pants.
Who else?
Yeah. Let's see. We had a lot of in the beginning. We had some beef jerky tastings off camera, of course. When that was we would sample beef jerky. That was just like a fun little thing that we did. We kind of laid them out, and we did blind taste tests. Everyone was in on that in the beginning. That was kind of a fun little thing we did. A few of us went to Paris together.
Really?
That's not really a joke, but
about Paris.
Well, it was after the first season. Let's see, myself and Stephanie and her boyfriend at the time, and Melissa and her husband, and Chelsea and Jordan and my wife Beth, and we all just hightailed it over. Andy wanted to come but couldn't that year, and so that was a blast. That's a perfect example. That I don't know. That normally doesn't happen. I don't think one season or two seasons into a show, you're all traveling together. It's a testament to how much we enjoyed each other's company, for sure. But that was always the case with the cast there. We were very easy with each other. I'm just trying to think of just other kind of jokes offset. We just
was there any like practical jokes, as in any pranking?
Not really. We weren't pranksters. No, we didn't do a lot of that. It was mainly things like doing things together, like beef jerky taste tests, or I think we did a hot sauce taste test once too.
Oh, I'd have been all over that.
Oh yeah. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. Well, exactly as you say, with casts like that, it's so important. It almost feels like a family, doesn't it? And I feel like something that you definitely relate to. Yeah,
for sure. Like I said, I mean, the collaboration factor is so important and really comes into play when I choose to do a job now. And life's too short, especially you get older and you're like, where do I want to spend my time? I like being home. I like being with my family. And, if I'm going to work, who am I working with? I have three questions I ask, will I make money, or will it be fun, or does it scare me? And so I need a yes on one of those, Rarely are all three answer with a yes. I try to kind of things I try to follow is don't be a dick, make it about the work. Those are two big things. And I try to choose people that are, believe similarly or agree with that sentiment, when I choose jobs like that. Yeah.
That's a really good point. When things become overwhelming, then, particularly when the spotlight is on you, how do you cope with that? And how have you coped with ego and spotlight and fame?
I don't like it. I don't. I'm uncomfortable with it. It was never why, but I also, know it's part of the job. I don't mean to sound sorry for myself. I'm not at all. I'm very lucky, and I love what I do, and to have the success that I had I'm very, very grateful. I handle it like this. It really, these are people that if fans come up and they're appreciating my work, and I'm very thankful for that. That part of the business is okay. The celebrity part, I'm not really, and so I don't get too wrapped up in that. But when people come up and say that they really like the show, that's always great to hear. And I try to be kind. I try to be polite, and if they are, and that's how I approach it. I realize that even if I'm having a bad day, that it's just part of the deal. Fame is I don't know. It's very easy to start focusing on the wrong things with stuff like that.
How are you with your own mental health, and how have you experienced mental health as a journey through your career? Have you always been quite in touch with it?
Generally, yeah, I struggle a lot with self-doubt. I struggle a lot with, am I a fraud? Am I really talented? Are people really buying into this? I can't believe. Wait, when are they going to find out I don't have it? That this is luck. So yeah, I struggle. I struggle with that from time to time. I think I have a handle on it nowadays. But I meditate, from time to time to try to keep that in check. But it's something that I'm aware I can slip into sometimes, and I can get a bit, self-destructive with addictions. I'm always careful of drinking, because I know that could be an issue. So, this is something that I've learned to keep an eye on, and have friends that I can turn to and say, like, hey, I'm having a tough time right now. This is what I'm thinking. Can I talk to you for a bit? It's in and out. I think in general, it's nice to be in a place with a family that supports me, and friends that support me.
Absolutely. Now, I am aware, and if you're happy to talk about it, that you started seeing a therapist recently again. Now, there's a massive stigma behind this, and people saying it's an admission of weakness, or there's a guilt attached to it.
Yeah, it's a shame.
How do you feel about that?
No, I think it's a shame that there is a stigma attached to that. I think it takes much courage to ask for help. I have trouble doing it. Part of the character in Outpost, it has trouble asking for help, and that's what gets her into trouble. And so, therapy and mental health I feel, is such a overlooked problem nowadays. And anyone that has the courage to say, I'm slipping, I need help, should be applauded. They're allowing themselves to contribute more to their life, and the people that love them. Like I wish more people would do it. It can it's helping me for sure.
I think it's definitely a massive thing. And so you said that you meditate. Are there any other things that you do to maintain your well-being? I know that your family is an immense source of happiness for you.
It is. They ground me so much. My son just gives me so much joy just watching him. One of the things I do is I take hikes. I walk a lot. I find that helpful just to think creatively as well, kind of thinking of ideas and working out stories. But I exercise often. Jump on the rowing machine from time to time and get a sweat going. But I think exercise is also very helpful for me to kind of focus my thoughts and stuff. Meditation, like you said, and also hanging out and talking to friends, being as social as I can in these times where it's very difficult to do that. You need that extra effort, but for me. I need it. I've always functioned well around people. I like being social. Isolation is difficult for me.
Oh, we need it.
Yeah, we really do. So, knock on wood. We'll be getting on the other side of this
100%.
Eventually.
On a brief side note, the first time that I ever came to LA, the first thing I did, there was this guy showing me around called Wade Williams. He's an actor, and he was in Prison Break. He played Brad Bellick in Prison Break.
Oh, okay.
And he was just like, Louis, we got to go up to the Hollywood sign. Let's go. So my first thing was hiking up to the Hollywood sign. So in full circle, next time I'm in LA, I need you to take me on a hike. Every actor I meet needs to take me on a hike.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Louis, I'd love to do it.
There we go.
Yeah. Are you here anytime soon?
I'm just waiting for my invitation in the post, Joe.
Welcome here anytime.
No, I remember actually one previous guest of the podcast did invite me out. I just haven't managed to tie it in yet, Busy, but we'll sort it out 100%.
Absolutely.
Something I need to talk to you about. And this is something that must have been the most incredible thing, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall for it, was your stag do.
Is what?
Your stag do.
Oh, you. Yes.
Your trip to Ireland. Now,
right.
I actually need to know everything, the details. Who was there? How long was this? And what antics did you get up to?
Wow. Well, this is quite rarefied air here. I was there in spring of 2014, and we were on the west side. It was a group of us, and a few actor friends of mine, and my dad, who was celebrating his 70th birthday on that trip, and so it was super special. My brother as well came, of course, and we had we really, and this is the God's honest truth, we really didn't get up to, there was nothing nefarious going on. We did a lot of drinking. We were in Donegal for most of it, most of the time, but we flew into Shannon and kind of went up the west side. My mother's side of the family were Lynch, and we're from Cork, and I'd been there once before, but this time we stayed on the west side. And we played some golf. We drank a lot of Guinness. We found a pub that had some musicians in there playing, and one of Peter Dinklage's brother is a musician, is a fiddler, and he had a buddy of his with him who was also a musician. And so you had these two incredible violin players joining in on these Irish jigs with these locals who were like, "What is going on?" And it was an incredible time. It was just filled with, like, as you can imagine, laughter and music. And we were meeting new people, and there wasn't any of, again, back to fame, there wasn't any of that. I find, the Irish wonderful that way, and that they're not impressed with anything. They don't, and I mean that in a good way. Like, they don't give a shit what you've done. who are you as a person? Can you do you have a good sense of humor? Can you do the crack? And so the good conversation. I mean, of course, and it was such a wonderful memory. That trip. That unfortunately, it's hard to get gigantic trips like that again nowadays. But it was. I was very lucky to have shared it with a group of people that were dear friends of mine. Like for instance, Bobby Cannavale, I've known since I was 15. He was in one of the earlier horror movies that I was doing at a young age because we both. He's from Jersey, but we both grew up in Florida, and so again, getting back to how finding your peeps at an early age and having them go through your life in these wonderful personal times, celebrations like your wedding, as well as these creative explosions that you have in your films or writing, to have them kind of straddle both of those important parts of my life. It's truly special.
It sounds like an incredibly wholesome experience, and that's incredible. Genuinely incredible.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So 2 final questions then. The first one being, do you think you'll ever release any of those original horror films?
Yeah, man. I mean, they're so bad. I mean, they're so I could throw them up on YouTube or something if I could find them. They're around. If the VHS tapes haven't degraded at this point. I don't know if I ever transferred them to digital. So that's a maybe. That's a maybe for sure.
That would be another lockdown project, probably.
It would indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And then my final question, and one I ask every guest: what does the word headstrong mean to you?
I think headstrong for me means a person that kind of knows the dark parts and the bright parts of yourself, and is able to kind of harness both in a way that is impactful on your life and on your output. It's confidence. It's a force of will, and it's also being honest with. It's mostly being honest with yourself and being okay with whatever truth you discover in that. That's headstrong to me. Put your put your head down and keep moving.
Amazing.
Keep moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. That was really nice. I've really enjoyed this, Joe. It's lovely to have chatted. I really appreciate
absolutely. My pleasure, truly, and thank you for having me. And I appreciate you. Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir.
And come out anytime. We'll go on a great hike.
And that's it for this episode of Headstrong. A massive, massive thank you to Joe for joining me on the podcast and for being so open and honest and discussing The Outpost, which I'm incredibly excited to see. Thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in. Please do rate the podcast, subscribe it, and pass it along to other people who may well enjoy it. Join me next week for another episode of the podcast.